I think about ERP projects and you look at the training materials are all documentation of the system. Press this button, then this button, then this button. But I don't see the training materials ever talk about, okay, in this situation, this is what happens and this is the process, right?
Well, so now you're picking on our training materials versus others, because our training materials do have the process built into
I'm not talking about I'm just saying in general. When you go into a company and you look at the training materials, they are all just screenshots. Right. And if your training materials are just a bunch of screenshots and what to click on, they're missing
a key component of the process. This is Peter Purcell.
And Bill Imony.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about change management.
What is change management? What does it mean? We hear about it all the time, and people always ask us, do we have change management in our company?
Wow, yes, I do manage my change. I take it out of my pocket and put it in a bucket, and then take it to the store when my bucket is full and get dollars for it.
Well, lately I haven't used very many coins, so I haven't had much change. But and I'll tell you, with the economy these days, sometimes I wonder where the change went. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. But more on a more serious note, change management is huge, especially when you start talking about systems and those types of things. In my mind, Bill, change management is pretty straightforward. It's really, how do you get people to do things differently, use tools differently, and not revert back to bad habits.
Right, but change management happens everywhere, and we do it in everyday life, and we may or may not know it. But by the same token, I have clients and companies, they tend to put too much effort into it sometimes?
Well, I think so.
Or overthink it maybe.
I think overthinking may be a better term. I mean, I just think back to, when we work for the Big Four, we seem to bash them an awful lot. But, change management was a bunch of spider charts and, pretty colors and stuff like that.
The change management acceptance curve.
Absolutely. I remember that. I actually really bought into that, too. That's the sad statement. But it never really resulted in any change.
Well, the curve never really helped because people just look at it and they're all on the anger piece of it anyway because they're sitting in a meeting talking about change management.
Yeah, instead of changing. I think for me and probably for Trinergy as a whole, I'm assuming for you as well, is change management truly is about eyeball to eyeball, sitting down, eyeball to eyeball to people and convincing them that even though in the short term their life may be a little tougher, changing the way they do things will result in better longer term.
Well, it reminds me, whenever I hear the word change management, it reminds me of that old joke about the change management consultant. Okay, so
on the ship.
So this happened way back in the 1800s. It was one of these cargo ships, and the captain of the ship brought a change management consultant on and said, "Hey, we have a problem on board our ship. It just smells really bad, and we need help." And so the consultant came on, and he went around, and he said, here's your big problem. You need to get your crew, they need to change their clothes more often. So the captain was like, great, thank you very much. The consultant left, and he said, okay, guys, lined up his crew. Jim, you change your underwear with Joe. Joe, you change yours with Jim. And so they all changed their clothes. But it still smelled bad, and I think that happens in a lot of companies, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, what's your perspective on change management? I mean, in reality.
Well, after being convinced that we had to have a bunch of charts and stakeholder assessments and all this other stuff, and putting people on a change curve somewhere where they ended up sliding back down the bottom of the change curve to complete denial. I think it seems to me it comes down to two things: communications and training, right?
Yeah, and in fact, it's kind of interesting. I don't even think I've used the term change management once in the last year of clients, because we always talk about training and new processes and procedures
communications,
and
right?
Communications, yeah.
And so when you think about communications and you talk about change and change management, it comes down to if you're going to make a change, you got to communicate with the right people and tell them what's happening. Mm-hmm. And somehow change management became this science of how are we going to communicate and what are the different methods. And sometimes it's just a basic, like you said a minute ago, an eyeball-to-eyeball conversation with someone and quick discussion, right?
Right. And it also, I think, has to do with who does the communication as well. If it comes from the CEO that things are going to quote unquote change, and you have to do things a little bit different going forward, it usually is better received than if it comes from somebody else.
Right, and also the source has to be credible, and that's right. I love this. We have a new acquisition coming on. I remember I was part of this merger, and they said nothing's going to change. And as soon as someone says nothing's going to change, look, hey, you better watch your back because something's going to change, and it probably means you're leaving the company.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that translates into get your resume ready and go start looking for a new job.
Right, exactly. And so it's having somebody credible, and it's the honest communication. Sometimes I find the best when companies either merge together or they put new systems in, when people are honest with their staff saying, hey, you know what, it's going to be painful. Mm-hmm. But what we're going to try to do is minimize the pain as much as possible. And we're going to make this a fun and exciting time. So there's going to be some things that are going to be tough. We're going to fight through them. We know they're there. And work with people to say, tell us where your fears and concerns are, and then put a plan together to make sure that you are fighting against those, right?
Right. And I think one of the keys there is honesty. I mean, because change is not easy for anybody, even for me. I mean, and theoretically we sell change. But being honest with these folks that, yes, it is going to be tough in the short term, but there are some longer term benefits out of it. And there's reasons why things have to be different going forward.
Right, and then as I think the difficult piece, though, and at least in what we've seen, Peter, is that when change becomes unsettling, it's usually the root cause of that is it's usually someone who is having a difficult time with that change, and I'll call that person a difficult person, and we've run into those people.
Yeah, in dealing with difficult people, if you don't win them over quickly, you just need to get rid of them, I think.
Yeah, because you merge two companies together, and one of the guys, he may be really smart and bright and knows a lot of stuff, and he might be hoarding information and trying to make things difficult for other people. And we've seen that where someone, and they may not be sitting there thinking, I'm going to be difficult today. They're just having a hard time with the change, and the output of that is them becoming difficult and difficult to work with. And I think companies are very hesitant to go up to that person and say, hey, you're being difficult. You either change or you're out.
Right. Well, what they're hoping for is all the posters that they've put up in the break room and all the emails that they've sent out will help this individual change. Well, and it just goes back to the whole purely eyeball to eyeball. You've got to get out there and talk to the difficult people and then the people who are eager to make whatever change necessary. It's best for the company.
Yeah, I remember one time I was working with this client, and they were merging two companies together, and it was evident that they didn't need two IT departments. Well, the company, the odd man out, the guy who's running the IT department for the odd man out, I guess, the one who's going away, I remember them. The HR department let him go. He was walking out of the building. He's like, there's no way the systems are going to work without me, and it's going down. Yeah. And of course, I thought, well, maybe he stuck a bug somewhere in the system to make it explode, but he left and nothing really went away. His prognostication was wrong. And I think a lot of companies are afraid to address where maybe someone appears to have a lot of knowledge or insight into something around the company, be it IT or human resources or something that's happening operationally, that they're hesitant to let them go because someone says, and it's called this fear they instill, well, if you let me go, the IT systems are going to break, or that customer is going to go away. And then lo and behold, you go visit that customer, and the customer is going, who's that you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's why most merger integration activities don't ever seem to come to a complete
Finish line,
conclusion,
right?
They never seem to hit the finish line because they're always worried about letting this person or that person go. But to your point, we've been in several times going in and helping companies reorganize, rationalize after a merger. And all of these people, literally 100% of the time, people who any of my clients thought were irreplaceable, or, if they left, the wheels would fall off. Never the case. Absolutely never the case.
Well, and the other part of it, though, too, is when they don't follow through on the merger, then they lose credibility, not only internally but with the stockholders.
To the market, yeah.
Right.
Then it becomes a really big deal. I mean, the other place where I see change management, not happening, and then it creates a real problem, and this starts to bleed into training a little bit, is around systems implementations. I'm not really sure why, but the minute the budget gets a little tight, you start cutting out training, right? And frankly, going out and talking to people about, hey, new systems coming. No, it's not going to be Nirvana. Who likes their ERP? Come on, let's get real here. But getting people ready for the new world. All that is cut out. And instead of going out and talking to these people eyeball, you're sending out pamphlets and emails. Nobody reads pamphlets and emails.
Right. What we'll do is we'll put a PowerPoint together and send it out to everybody, and that'll be their training. But here's the interesting thing, though. On the flip side of that, we say they cut the training out of the budget. But what's interesting to me in this day and age, I see people on their phones and using all different applications, all the way from their for trading or for playing a game or whatever it might be, or their mail, and they figured out how to use it, and they didn't get any training. So what's up with that?
Well, it's easy. I mean, because you're talking about just one leg in a stool, and I know we overuse that analogy, but the
like
other
a true
leg,
consultant, one leg in a stool.
There you go, one-legged stool.
If you pull one out, it falls over, right?
It falls over.
Okay.
Because here's
Unless you
the
have really
issue.
good balance.
We're talking about process and controls there too. So it's one thing to be able to use the application. It's something else completely different to do it under the context of here's a process, and I have to understand that what I'm doing right now, how does it affect upstream and frankly downstream activities, in the system. And so without that training, without understanding what the process really is and where you fit within the process, you might technically do things correctly, but that doesn't mean it's accurate nor with the right controls.
Yeah, but I still hear people saying, I didn't get enough training. It seems like that's just a lousy excuse.
I do think that is a lousy excuse.
They sit there, they got their phone sitting there, they're able to figure out some complex application on their phone, but they can't. They said, I didn't get enough training how to use my SAP system and put a journal entry in or put invoices in. Is it more about their lack of interest, really?
It could be, Bill. I mean, I think, though, when it comes to training, and I've got to give a little bit of defense to people at the wellhead and the like, if you have a field ticketing system, the technology of using the field ticketing system is probably pretty straightforward. But knowing what to do with price list and how to give discounts and when do you give discounts and what's in the contract, being able to know that and know where to go within the system to try to find that kind of information out, sometimes that's not super straightforward.
Yeah, but okay, you got a good point there. You got me there because you're right. You got to know where to look and where to get things and get the right information. That makes sense. But,
well, and you also need to know what your responsibility is. You need to know what your authority is to give discounts, right? Because the last thing you want to do is to give your pusher or operator a chance to give a 30% discount on a service, all right, where then the company man signs the field ticket and then the manager in the approval cycle says, whoa, you didn't have the authority to do that. It's a little late. Right, so
I would hope the system would stop you from doing that, though, right? Or are you saying they're going around the system?
I think it's just
going around.
And then
they're putting in their... Okay.
Exactly, and that's why training around systems can be so important. It's less about how the functionality within the system works. It's less about the poking and pushing the buttons. It's more understanding what you really are responsible for and
See,
what you have authority for.
I think you're right, but isn't the bigger problem though, when it comes to training, is they're training people how to use? Because I think about ERP projects, and you look at the training materials. The training materials are all documentation of the system. Press this button, then this button, then this button. But I don't see the training materials ever talk about, okay, in this situation, this is what happens, and this is the process, right?
Well, so now you're picking on our training materials versus others, because our training materials do have the process built
I'm not
into
talking about
them.
I'm just saying in general. When you go into a company and you look at the training materials, they are all just screenshots. And if your training materials are just a bunch of screenshots and what to click on, they're missing
a key component of the process.
Yeah,
exactly.
And talking about why you do things, who's doing what next,
Right.
And frankly, you know what though, it's kind of hard to document that stuff.
Yeah, it is. It is. But you know what? With the new tools that you have today, which I know this isn't an ad, but with the new tools that you have today, it's a little bit easier. You know, once you get the process documented and interleaving it into system functionality.
But isn't it also, though, comes down to your earlier comment around eyeball to eyeball? And
Yeah,
going out,
absolutely.
And I remember this one project we were working on. We were helping a electrical supply company implement a new reporting tool. Mm-hmm. And we got it all put in and everything. It was time to go and train people in the field. And so we sent guys out eyeball to eyeball. And I remember this one instance where we're sitting with the CFO and CIO in the room, and they said, "This is great, love it. I bet there's no way you're going to be able to train old Sam in the field office in San Antonio." And I said, "Well, actually, he's using the system." And they said, "Whoa, there's no way. That guy, he's resistant to change, period." And I said, "Well, we sent one of our guys out there. They sat in his office on his own computer. And what we did is we created this little 3-step process. This is how you run a report. Step 1, 2, 3. Showed him how to do it. He did it. And then all of a sudden he's creating his own reports because we gave him the 3-step process and how to do it. And included turning on your computer, right, opening up the app, and clicking on a report. And voila. And they were shocked to hear that, but we didn't send them to a classroom though.
Right, exactly. And I mean, another example that we have is right now we're working with a field services company with their field ticketing. And what we're doing is even early in the process of redesigning how they're going to use the field ticketing system, we're taking the process diagrams, we're going out to the field, and we're wargaming with all the different types of transactions that are going to run through the system in the field ahead of time so that we know what's going on and the people in the field have input, which, by the way, you know, they feel great about. And then that way we can build the new processes and modify the system around that. Then when we go back out and train, we can say, yep, we tested these, 80 different scenarios, all these different special cases, and this is how you do it. And when you get people eyeball to eyeball actually working through all those different scenarios, and you stick around, training's not an hour and a half. Training is a couple of days or more. All of a sudden, they understand it.
I think you hit on something though right there, and that's key. Is you use the word wargaming, but really testing all the exceptions, because I think that's the other problem with change management too. Is people always go to the exception and they say, "Well, I can't do this because if it's customer that starts with a C and they're based in Texas and their logo's red and this, then we've got to do this special process," or whatever it might be. And people always I say they're resistant to change because of the exceptions. And what you just described is testing all the exceptions to show how those work too, right? Is that what you're getting at? I mean,
absolutely.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. No. That sounds like what you're getting at, because that to me, it's all the exceptions. We would put in a revenue system for an exploration and production company, and they would go, well, for properties in the Permian Basin or for properties in this state, we've got to do X, Y, Z. And so when you said let's talk about your exceptions, everything was an exception, nothing was the norm, but they were all focused on the exceptions, not the norm.
Right.
And so if you build a system around the exceptions, you're never going to finish the system. But if you test those as part of the process as a whole, then you then are able to make that change stick, right?
Yeah, that's right. Because it's the exceptions that these guys are going to throw out as excuses for not doing things the new way.
Yeah. So earlier when I was talking about the people using their app and figuring out how to use it, I was really getting at the what's in it for me. I mean, I look at whenever any app that you use on your phone, you use it because it's going to help you. Maybe you're using Duolingo to help learn another language, or maybe you're reading, playing the word game, Words with Friends, or you're doing a Facebook to see how many likes you can get and all that kind of stuff. It's all fun stuff. It's all what's in it for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I'm playing, rehash Centipede and stuff like that. It tells you where my technology is from. But I'm joking. But yeah, it is. It's all.
I saw that on your phone. You're playing Candy Crush.
Yeah, there you go.
Admit it.
Candy, yeah, or Tetris, for gosh sakes. But in all seriousness, you're right. I mean, it's all about what's in it for me. And
so you got to put everything in terms of what's in it for them too, because you were talking about a field ticketing system and everything. We had a client. They were in the trucking business, and essentially the people did not like using the system. So we'd go talk to these guys, go, why don't you like using it? We're about to put a new system in, and we're thinking we got to make this new system better. It's going to be field dispatch and all this other stuff. And we essentially found out where some of their other pain points were, and we said, hey, that could be solved with the new system. So what we essentially did is we said, hey, here's something that can be done for you, and give you a better report or better information or whatever it might be, or fix a process problem that they have. And in turn, they'll start using the system. So there's something, what's in it for them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Now, I do have a question for you, though. When you go out into the field.
It gets scary when you start asking me questions. You never know what's going to come out next.
Yeah, really. But, when you go out into the field, think about this for a second, right? You come driving up. You're
I'm
from
outstanding
Houston.
in the field.
There you go. But you're coming in from headquarters, right? You're coming in from Houston and the like. These guys are going to be a little suspicious of you showing up. I know what I do when I get out there. I drive a white pickup truck. I back into my parking space. I try to wear beat up boots just like everybody else.
You got your chewing tobacco in your
back
pocket.
I don't go that far. But what are some of the techniques? I mean that you use to get these guys comfortable so they'll actually pay attention to you and spend time with you?
First thing I do is I bring them donuts.
Yeah, right. I've done that.
And then I take them to the local Mexican restaurant and I'll buy lunch.
Oh gosh.
Now I might regret that going home, but on the ride home, but we'll do that. And I think part of it is though, and I think this is a mistake a lot of corporate executives make when they go out to the field, they don't understand the business well enough to carry a conversation about what's happening. And the companies that are successful with change management, their executives understand. So when they're out in the field, they know what the equipment is that's sitting out in the field. So I remember I was sitting in one meeting, and one of the guys joked about this guy in the middle of Central Texas, joking about their chief accounting officer coming out, and he didn't know what a frac truck looked like. And he didn't know the difference between that and a saltwater hauling truck. And they were making fun of him. He wasn't there, and they're saying, oh, what a dumb guy. And he had no credibility with them. Now, on the other hand, I have some clients whose executives can go out there and tell them, how to tune the engine on their trucks and get into and know exactly what every single piece and part is of their fleet is. And those people have some credibility. And so part of it is understanding their business and understanding what's what, right? So when I'm talking to someone about a BOP seal, we're talking the same language, right? Right,
exactly. And that's kind of what I was getting at is, the change management in my mind isn't all about, just to reel back a little here, spider charts and pretty pictures. It is about getting out there and getting with the people and understanding where they are, where their pain points are, and fixing it, and going from there.
And you're talking about communications, right?
Yeah.
All of this is communications. This is how you communicate, what you communicate, right?
Exactly.
And we did not talk about, formatting emails and sending out videos. We're talking about eyeball to eyeball communications that people, even though we have cell phones and video conferencing and all that technology today, people still want to be heard. People still want to see you in person, and that's the best
Right.
way to communicate.
Right. In having this conversation, I remember working with, a very large client who had thousands of employees, and their question was, well, we can't go out and meet face-to-face with every single employee. No, you don't have to, because the employee network works fantastic. You go out to a handful of sites. You get a CEO to go out to a handful of sites and get into an argument with their crew, a crew pusher about, which tong to use and be right. I guarantee you that will go through the company like a house afire. And if that CEO then does send out an email to 1,000 employees, there's instant credibility there.
Or finding the guy in the company who's the outspoken district manager and getting on his good side, and because he's gonna sit in the meeting when the district manager are together and complain about something. But if you got him on your side, and with the new system or the acquisition, he's going to step up and say, this is a good thing. And I've seen them do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So these techniques, when we mention, or I mention eyeball to eyeball, I get a lot of people that kind of look at me and give me that sideways glance like, there's no way.
Well, they don't want to spend the money. It comes down to two things. They don't want to spend the money for training.
Right.
To send people out, or they're just too lazy to get, sometimes it means flying to a location and driving for 3 hours. And that drive is sometimes through something that looks like the desert. Think about some of the remote. How about that last time you had to go
to Pampa, Texas? There was nothing between me and the wind but the wind.
Right. But you know what? I think people appreciate it when you go out and talk to them and take the time to explain things to them in person.
Yeah, absolutely.
On their site.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And then, guess what? Even if you don't make a change based on their recommendations or anything that they've told you, at least they feel like they've been heard, they know they've been heard, and they'll actually respect the decision no matter what much better than...
Well, you just hit on something. Communications is listening, right?
Yes.
And people might think, well, I'm communicating. I told you what we're doing, so why aren't you doing it? Did you ever just stop and listen, right?
Yeah. Ask questions. Start by asking questions. I always start by asking questions when I go out to the field.
Yeah, and then you listen and they get to be heard. They feel like their grievances have been heard. Whether you've done anything about it or not, they feel like they've been heard, right?
Yeah. I mean, I remember doing some work for a saltwater hauling company, and they had a tremendous amount of trouble around some of their drivers, to your point of using dispatch system, right? And I remember going out to the site that they claimed nobody could change out there, and they were about ready to sell this site. They were so frustrated with these guys. And we went out there, we just asked a bunch of questions at first. I mean, when I walked out there, I just asked questions about their fleet. I asked questions about their maintenance schedule. I just started asking them questions. And then through the questioning, led them through almost a discussion. Okay, so what are your concerns around the dispatch? So why are you having trouble getting trucks out? Why are the drivers having trouble using? I mean, it just became part of a much bigger conversation. And through that, we were able to pinpoint some pretty, substantive issues that they had, but they were easy to fix. And those guys, in the end, were some of the best at using that dispatch system.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think if we think about communications as a two-way street, right? It's the listening, letting them talk. Good point. And asking questions. And so, we just to kind of recap here, we've talked about change management in terms of communications and training. Frankly, is there anything else? Have we oversimplified this?
I don't think so, Bill. I mean, we do it all the time, and I think...
Oversimplify things? Or
no, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, it really comes down to communications and training. And if you have a good communication strategy for whether it's an acquisition or new system, and a good training strategy, and you have all the right elements there, then you've got change management.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of change management, this has been sponsored by Evan, your IT guy. On-demand IT support at much lower prices than you would expect. So we wanted to thank Evan, your IT guy, for sponsoring this podcast.
Yes, and thank you, and we'll talk next time.